Hello, welcome to the Broderick Wallace channel. I am joined here by my good friend
Samuel Connor,
and we don't really know where to begin. This is completely ad hoc, off the cuff, and it might be a little bit unprofessional, but you see, this isn't about entertainment. This isn't about creating a product. This isn't about neediness or attention or getting dressed up and presenting an image. This is about the truth. And I've always thought for a long time that it's very easy to stand back in the shadows with your arms folded, like when you go and see a band and you're judging them. Oh, the singer's all right, but the guitar player's a bit crap and can't really hear the bass. It's like, well, they're on stage, they're doing it, and you have to make a contribution of one kind or another, because to stand back in the shadows is a kind of cowardice. So that kind of puts you in an awkward position where it's like, how do I want to present myself? And it would be a shame if we didn't talk about this subject, if it wasn't presented in one form or another. So if there's any pauses, and we're going to look back and think, oh, we forgot that, and then there was, and we might, we did, but that's not what it's about. Anyone that will appreciate this, even many years in the future, will be more than willing to give us a little bit of patience. So Samuel, where do you think we should begin?
Begin at the beginning.
Begin at the beginning. So we've been mates for what, over 10 years now?
2008 we met, so we're actually looking at 12 years now.
Yeah, 12 years. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep out any names of any, real, obviously those are not our real names. In a way, they are our names because we've chosen them, and they will have other purposes in other formats, if you like. So we're not going to talk specifically yet about, because it kind of begins as musicians. Rhythm guitar player, singer, songwriter in a heavy metal project. So I meet Samuel online, we become friends. It's not worth going into details, but I carried on with my project myself, but fuck! Yeah, we had to cut it there because said something I shouldn't have done. I told you we're not professional here. So are we recording? Yeah, we're recording. Yeah. So this music project, Samuel joined me on this music project, and it was like a concept piece over 3 songs where we were looking for an idea. And where did it originate from? What was the genesis?
Well, we did our first track that we did as a project together was called
Fuck!
And that was about a slightly different subject, but it gave us a working relationship that we found was really fruitful. So that catalysed a kind of, our interest was in history. We liked to make music around history and historical themes, didn't we? As well as things that had a deeper meaning and relevance to a spiritual journey. There was always that flavour coming from the project that you already had. So we wanted to keep that vibe. And it's difficult to know where it originated from, because I'm sure it originated from more than one place at the same time, but it was something to do with Bluebell Hill, wasn't it? Something triggered that.
I think I had the idea to write a song about the ghost of Bluebell Hill, and then didn't you suggest bringing the concept out a little bit wider? I can't. Do you know what? We can't remember. I don't think we could really remember exactly. It just happened organically, yeah, there was talk of the ghost of Bluebell Hill, and then because at the time, pretty much didn't have any knowledge on it. I didn't know if this was linked to a real person exactly, and if it was, I didn't want to offend anyone. So I said, you know what, maybe we'll, just tackle the history of the area or something, and then we were both coming up with riffs, and then you had this idea like, hey, let's make this song where I can imagine this riff fits the Celts in this particular way, and it all started rolling on and snowballing from there. So we don't need to go into specific details about the music project, except to say that it is a kind of it's like it's a concept piece that tells the death of the Celtic culture in the area at the hands of the Roman invasion, which looks a little bit deeper back into the Neolithic past, centered around Kit's Coty and the Stones. And we kind of channeled or invented an entity called Fuck, which was like a kind of Shiva, like a kind of a very similar kind of god form, which would represent the ending of an age and the birthing of a new age. So it took the form of a white deer called Fuck. You see, things started to get spiritual real quick. I went to visit the Stones, because I had to find them, because I had the idea, hey, we'll take some pictures around the Stones. And this started snowballing into the idea, because of my interest in archaeoastronomy and magic and the occult over the years, I had the idea like, fuck, let's time it for the winter solstice 2012, because it's like that big date, the end of the world 2012, and it's like we're writing about the end of the Celtic culture. It couldn't have been more perfect. So anyway, we did that music project. There's songs on there, there's one about Neolithic stones and their power in particular. The first track is like an exodus, and the last track is like the end of culture. And this ties in with the idea that culture is like the software that runs on the hardware, if you like, that somewhere in the in the astral realms, in the Akashic records, if you like, there is a permanent record of everything that has ever happened. So it stretches out, it makes a triumph of the tragedy. So is there anything you want to say on that music project? For
that little period of time, yeah, I mean, it's especially interesting for me because I'd only really started to discover elements of my own spirituality at that time. Just started maturing. I think I was just turned 30 at that time, or just about to turn 30. So it's a kind of significant time for me, and a lot of synchronicities started occurring around that time. Like you mentioned the white deer, and obviously your interest in deer came from the hunting as well that I used to do.
Oh yeah, we should just interrupt and say, when we first met, I did like a training course in deer stalking, and I wanted to become a deer stalker, which is quite off the wall now looking back, but younger guy all fired up, I want to be a hunter. And it turns out that the guy that I was doing my deer stalking adventures with, who kind of took me under his wing, used to be this guy's next door neighbour. And that tied in with the development of our deer god. Fuck! Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, he wasn't actually my next door neighbour. He was a gentleman that lived around the corner from me, and he was my best childhood friend's next door neighbour. And I mean, this guy nearly even killed me once, because when he was shooting, me and my friend were in the woods hiding in thickets, and they were shooting towards us, and we stood up and just waved our arms about. And so basically that's the closest I've come to dying, so that's also interesting. Bless him. And so yeah, there was that. And at the time we were talking about Ghost Heart, about the deer, I happened to be in the village of Pluckley, and I was in the shop and I looked on the wall and there were pictures drawn in a sort of Celtic, like a floral kind of style, and there was a picture of this white deer in the woods, a perfect image of what we were imagining.
I'll go and get it.
Yeah. So
I'm actually moving at the moment. I've got everything in boxes. It's all crazy, but I know where that is.
yeah, so I'll carry on while he fetches the picture. But so I saw this picture, and the lady in the shop she knew the local area really well, and I said, this picture of this deer. I said, is that, who painted that? She says, oh, she's a local artist, and apparently that deer is not just a legend, that there is a white stag in the forest near Pluckley, but it's very, very difficult to find, despite it being very big and an incredible beast. I've never seen it myself, but that was a synchronicity that happened around that time. So that picture that's a print from the artist that I had framed, and gave that to Broderick as a gift around that time, and it helped solidify the project that we were working on, and and also things at the time and the run up to that winter solstice and making that CD. I didn't have much dreams, and my dreams started to not only increase rapidly, but I started to have dreams where I was very lucid, where I knew I was dreaming and I could move about in them, and that was particularly strange for me. So I started to really pay attention to what was going on internally and around me in the landscape, and being someone that grew up in the countryside, I had an affinity with the landscape, and this whole project really brought it back to me as something spiritual rather than something that was just really physical for me at the time. So yeah, but that's about my sort of feelings about it at the time, and and then it kind of takes us to the winter solstice 2012, wasn't it, where you finished the production?
Yeah, I finished the production on the music project, and released that on YouTube, 3 tracks and a small outro, and it's such a big achievement for myself and for Samuel, because all those years loving metal, it was like a gift to my younger self in a way, because if I could have, to realise fully, pro sounding metal, being an artistic, creative person, you always feel that there's something bursting out of you, and I hit the nail on the head, and it was just you imagine all that energy, and so all of that emotion and energy and a sense of achievement and pride have gone into this, and then we offered it as a gift on the winter solstice to what we kind of figured in our minds. We were starting to work out that, because we'd done a little bit of reading and stuff, that this wasn't just a ghost, and because we were starting to have strange dreams and visions, and our kind of psychic, the more time we spent at the Stones, our kind of psychic capabilities started increasing, along with the the things that we were reading. There's so much, it's impossible. There was, and there still is now, believe me. It's just it branches out, and every thread splits in, and sometimes it's hard to. That's why we have to make a record now before I'm leaving this house, and pick up the pieces later on, and in the future there will be written records and this kind of thing. There's a lot of art involved. It's overwhelming, really, and so we know that now we have to put something down, as even like a reminder to ourselves. So we won't worry about missing out lots of things, because there are too many things. But you see, around about this time, I'm breaking up with my wife at the time. It's a dark period in a way, where I'm coming into a realization more of who I really am and who I want to be, and it's breaking my heart, really. And me and my now ex-wife are drifting apart. So there's a lot of stress and darkness going on as well. And that would lead on into some surprising personal avenues and revelations. But you see, I think it's the night before the winter solstice 2012, isn't it?
Mm.
You see, that is where I'm sleeping downstairs because me and my ex-wife are not getting on. So I'm the guy on the couch, and it actually is this house, by the way, because I moved out. Then she moved on from this house with a new partner, and then I came back to live here, and now it's being sold and I'm moving on again. So it's kind of complicated like that. But the night before the winter solstice, when we're just about to meet in the early hours of the morning and present this, what I describe myself as a magical act, this piece of art that is timed to a date in terms of archaeoastronomy with the winter solstice. It with the art and the lyrics, it's like a gift to what we're slowly starting to work out is a conscious presence at the stones. It's a way of saying thank you, and we want to know more, and also it's just a fucking cool thing to do. It's just exciting. It's like fuck. But it is very strange. Like you think all those things that need to be in place. Like we meet. I move into the area, but now looking back, we do see it as something at the stones. Kind of called us in, and it was kind of that might be easy to say with retrospect, but it does feel that way, and that is the way these things tend to work. So before we get to the night of the night before the winter solstice, we'll pick up at that point, and that'll be a major little milestone here. So
we're talking about 2012 winter solstice, or are we talking about the following?
The 2012 winter
2012,
solstice, yeah. So now obviously this isn't entirely new. I mean, I'd been having out-of-body experiences for years, infrequently, and I'd made a kind of personal pilgrimage to Egypt in my early 20s to visit the Great Pyramid, and I had a lot of occult literature on the bookshelf, and you'd have phases where life was hard and you were kind of knuckling down, but you'd always, it was like a kind of like a secret personal religion and a belief that was a strong feeling of in terms of dreams and premonitions, and basically all that stuff that happens to people like us. It's always a story of gradual threads coming together and then points of revelation, and it's a little bit embarrassing in a way because we are the first to make criticisms of a lot of the desperation and that we see online. And in my previous video I talked about spirituality and trauma, how the two are linked, and hard times kind of push these things out of you. There's a notion of trials, and it's very easy to lose the plot and start thinking that you're special, and we've always been really aware of that, haven't we? Really self-critical, and trying to look at it objectively, and not get too swept away with the meanings of everything. But when I think back to being a young teenage boy, and I was shortly to be ejected from my home, and there was a book on the shelf, David Conway, Magical Primer. Not the best book on magic in terms of complexity, but something that a teenager can understand. And after having my first out-of-body experience, I read that book, and for some reason just I was like, yeah, of course, I know on some level that this stuff is real. And you'd be wrestling with that because there's no one you could talk about it to. Like, why do I believe that magic is a real thing? And there's all these people, Crowley and all these characters, the Golden Dawn and all this thing. So there must be something to it, because it can't come out of nothing. You know, all those people for thousands of years going back through history, they can't just be deluding themselves with complete and utter bullshit. You know, there has to be something to it. So that thread was kind of on the sidelines for, you know, many years. And I believe you also had a kind of awareness as well.
Yeah, without really realising it, because I never really had any occult books or influences or anything like that when I was younger, but obviously I love metal, so you were going to come across that theme now and again. And the only thing, in fact, something came back to me about a year ago about my childhood that I completely forgot, and it was a name. I was just sitting there one day and I had this name, and I can't remember what the guy's. Oh, it was Horik Svensson. It just popped into my head, and I was like, Horik Svensson. Where's that come from? Horik Svensson. I looked it up, and it was a book. There's an author called Horik Svensson that writes about runes, Scandinavian mythology. And I was like, God, I used to have a book on runes, and it was written by this guy, and it was purple, and I just suddenly remembered it, and I must have been about, I don't know, 12 years old or something. And then I remembered that I had a set of runes in a little Hessian bag, and I also remembered that I used to, without really knowing what I was doing, burn candles and incense sticks and arrange them and arrange the runes, and I didn't even know what I was doing. But it just came back to me. I was like, yeah, what's all that about? And then I also remember copying all the images out of the booklet of Seventh Son by Iron Maiden, and being really
Same here.
Really quiet. You remember you had that with the Grim Reaper in the background and his cape swirled around in a big arc, and I remember drawing that out in pencil. And that's your favourite album, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's another little coincidence. But that Iron Maiden thing was really kind of that really tweaked my imagination, and I must have been only 12, 13. And being someone that up until a teenager was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness, that was kind of quite a brave thing to be doing. Not that I stayed in that religion, and my mother, who was a Jehovah's Witness, didn't either. She soon realised the hypocrisy and now practices her religion freely. But yeah, and there's not much to be said about those kind of Christian days. But it also gave me a grounding in spirituality and a little bit of religious practice. So no matter how hypocritical you felt some of it was, having a bit of religion as a child is better than not having any. Doesn't matter what it is, it just teaches you a framework of spirituality. But I went off at a tangent there, but yeah, that rune thing is remarkable because I completely forgot until I was reading a book on runes a few months ago, and then it was like, oh, I do know about this. This is weird. It's almost like my brain had blocked it out. Like, yeah, but I can't remember what your original point was.
Oh no, I'm really glad you said that, because I almost left out, you know, something key, because we're setting up a little bit about the past before we get to that date, so it doesn't seem like fuck. That's just too extreme, because there is a build up, you know. And I remember I'd keep going back to this book on magic, and you know, I started reading a lot about Crowley, and archaeoastronomy was a massive one for me. Robert Bevell, you know, Graham Hancock, John Anthony West. This was a massive part of my life, you know, and still is, you know, really, you know, a strong, you know, Egyptophile, you know, in many ways. So what I did is a friend at the time, obviously not this guy, you know, someone else. I just rang him up one day and said, I want to do magic, are you up for it? And he's like, what? You know. So yeah, I got this idea, like I've been reading about, you know, these magic techniques, like, you know, you make this circle out. So anyway, so we go out into the woods and we make a circle of salt, and I like invoke the archangels of the, you know, the cardinal points, and, you know, say a few prayers, and, you know, wafting incense around and all this kind of stuff. And you see, at this point, there's kind of bits left out. It's easy, like, oh, you kids these days with the internet, you can just go straight on and you can listen to, you know, Brian Chassan and Pug Runyon and Gordon White, and you can have things explained to you, but back then, you know, there wasn't this presence on the net, so there were always bits missing, and it was really. But luckily, we were still young enough at the time to benefit from the internet, because we had that all available, obviously in 2012 when things kicked off again. But anyway, so there was a piece missing for me. It's like, you know, what is the contact point? Because as far as I remember in this book, you just kind of waited for something to appear, and I was a little bit skeptical about whether that was going to work, especially because I had my mate with me. So I thought, right, well, I'll make a Ouija board. So I made a Ouija board, had that in the middle of the circle with a glass on it, and we just sat cross-legged, and, you know, I asked the, you know, angels, you know, the archangels on the quarters, please allow a spirit to come through for communication. And the glass moved immediately, and we were talking to something that described itself as the law keeper of God. It was like, fuck, like your first Ouija board experiences. I am the law keeper of God. And the whole circle was just filled with this presence of this being that was like, you know, that we, you know, had the impression that it was like thousands of years old. And, you know, it was again, it's like, talk about beginner's luck, you know. So basically the entity, the law keeper, you know, I just call him law keeper these days. I only spoke to, you know, him once. He never appeared again, and he gave me the name for my music project and told me that one day I would write a book, and that's about all I can really remember. So, you know, forgive me, I know it sounds a little bit like, oh, you know, origin stories kind of, you know, but it's just fucking true, you know. So you've got all of that going on, you know, heavy metal and magic and archaeoastronomy and dreams and visions and, you know, spending time in the woods, deer hunting. This guy is in love with the countryside. He's a country guy. We both love Lord of the Rings with a passion.
Yeah, it needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, it needs to be mentioned. Yeah.
That mental landscape of Middle Earth is not just symbolic, it's a reality that still breathes in the lands and England, and you know, so it's not just a connection you have to literature or to folklore or legends or fantasy. It's a connection to the real deep roots that are part of your heritage, part of your ancestry. And when you begin working magically, you know, it's not uncommon to hear various well-known magicians say you need to personalise it for you, and that's what sort of really worked for us. That when we began that music project, we were already putting ourselves in touch with powers that, you know, breathed within us. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't just pick a subject and really get to know it. You know, it was coming out of us, as well as, you know, us pulling it towards us. It was a two-way relationship.
Yeah.
It was a meeting of two sort of forces. So,
and where Tolkien's really important is because obviously Tolkien, I mean, you know, we don't need anyone to, you know, we believe that Tolkien was, you know, channeling and tapping into, you know, a story that wanted to be told. You know, we don't take away any credit, but any work of art that is, you know, has merit, there is a muse involved. You know, this is just part of the way the mind, you know, the creative mind, you know, behaves when you're connected, you know, when you're deep in, you know. So it's like there is a lost, you know, I mean, you can link Blake to this as well, you know, this longing for Albion, you know, for basically a native Celtic, you know, in inverted commas, spirituality stretching all the way back to the Neolithic, that was curtailed, first of all, by the Roman invasion, and then, I mean, you know, obviously going on from that, the tragedy with Boudica, and, you know, Boudica, love you. Fuck! And, fuck! You know, so we are, you know, currently at a time when, you know, there's heavy immigration into the country, and, you know, when you're not, you know, living in a, and don't get me wrong, I mean, you know, my ex-wife foreigner, my current girlfriend foreigner. We're very liberal people, but we still recognise that there is a decline in social identity going on. So we're linking what's going on at Kits Coty with seeing as though she is a goddess of death, with that sense of the death of the culture. Think about the music project we did as well, the death, of a culture. Death is a running theme. So it's like Tolkien was trying to, export a native, British mythology, and we know that even if we weren't conscious about it in the beginning, that has been something that has been important to us as well, and we feel a sense of loss in the landscape, because as much as we love Hermetic magic and Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica and both ayahuasca drinkers, so we call upon different gods from different countries at times, and we mix and match names, and in a very kind of chaos magic style, if you like, because how can you not? We're two white guys, from the UK. We know that our hearts and our roots are European, and we would like there to be more. But we know that this was written down in the Middle Ages, the original records, Druids didn't write anything down, etc., etc. So it's hard to know what to trust. So we're intrigued by the idea of actually extracting information from what do they call it? A prime source, a first-hand source, or a primary source? Yeah. I know we're getting a little bit ahead on that, but it's really, really important to state that is also part of the mindset. People with a love of world mythologies and very broad-minded, yet we recognise the loss, especially with the internet age, and the youth of today can barely make it from one end of a book to another. We were born and lived a lot of our lives in a time where there was no internet, where we read books and information was more precious, and there was a stronger sense of social cohesion. So that is definitely a factor going on in all this. But obviously don't if anyone's listening, don't take that to negative conclusions. Let's just say that we're aware of the realities on all sides of the political spectrum, and we practice a kind of eclectic view, but we have a strong pride in our ancestral roots, which is exemplified by the fact that, say, for instance, ancestor veneration is actually a part of the vibe over the last few years, going on the winter solstice, to the stones and making offerings, to the ancestors, as well as carrying a pantheon of gods and goddesses, from all four corners of the globe.
I'm enjoying listening to
Yeah,
it.
sorry.
I'm just sitting in the background, just enjoying it. It's nice.
I felt like I was hogging for a bit there. I'm so sorry.
No, you spend so much of the day talking about numbers and margins and stock rotation and distribution and all that stuff, and then you can come here, and this is a point that's worth making. It's like we both run our own businesses. We're both working hard. We've both got families. You've got kids, and it's an incredibly busy life. And most people will know that you can devote your entire available energy every day to just managing those things in an okay way, and let alone if you want to exceed it, then you really do have to knuckle down. And I know people that work a lot more than me and work harder, and most people always put themselves under pressure to work even harder and devote all their time to that sort of productivity, but we recognise that if it's not balanced with a creative endeavour, that then the soul isn't satisfied and it will all break down. So and when you're artistic and you've got that bug to accomplish things in that way or feel connected in that way, and to an extent everyone does, but if it really burns you, then you need to really realise that. So normal day-to-day life, and then we can come here and have conversations like this and make videos like this, and without having to put a robe on and burn incense in the background and say, make it look like we work in a temple, or our entire life is just surrounded by magical things and magical spells and all that sort of stuff. That kind of real stereotype is like that. That's wearing the t-shirt. We're not wearing any t-shirts here. Just talking experience.
Because we're in love with the romance of the Golden Dawn, and we look back to those times of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and wish that we could be walking into some Masonic hall, and you know what I mean, like opening some.
I know it's still a little romantic dream, being alive in that time of. This is the problem with the internet now. It's like that nostalgia. It wouldn't exist in 50 years' time. Because it would still be present in digital form. You can't recreate the smell or the sounds coming from a
fuck.
They're things that are good to have and exploring as part of your imagination, as part of your
But saying that, we would rather be where we are now, even though we do look back with nostalgia to that and read those books from that time. And you see, because there's something special where you have to read, you have to be active. You can't be an armchair magician. You have to do things. And we've had struggles, and sometimes we see ourselves as a kind of opposite, because sometimes I've gone like full on, and I've had to sort of, oh my God, like come back and take care of material life, where fuck better at taking care of the material things. And he's thinking, he's sort of looking at from my end and wishing that he could have a bit more time with the preternatural things. I believe that's fair. I don't want to.
No, I'd say you're right, and we've both talked recently about getting it's very, especially when if you're creative, you're kind of a bit moony, and you'll flow and fluctuate, and you expect everything to be 50-50 all the time. It's just not going to happen. There'll be times when the wind will be blowing in a certain direction, times when it won't, So for the last few years, the way your wind's been blowing has been in a different direction to mine.
But I do see that as an equalising, and I don't want to. I really do. You do want to be fair about that point, because we're both very sensible people that both run businesses, and we both meet our responsibilities when they need to be met. We try to be moral people. We try to be good people, and we're aware that we need to work. So I guess I carried the burden of knowing that I needed to do this in order that I could come out on the other side and be better in that way. And then it's the opposite. Fuck. That he needed to do things on his side so he could be better, and we've kind of reached a plateau now where we're both in the process of having that kind of even out and be kind of even by the very process of making this video. So that covers a little bit of prehistory. So I think what we'd do is I need a piss. So we'll stop it there, and then we'll come back for the next part, and we'll start at the night before the winter solstice 2012. Fuck! Right, so there's always this battle with so much, and so we're going to try and be more concise, and because there will be an opportunity to fill in all of the blanks at a later date, and we've yet to make a timeline, but this is actually quite helpful in making that timeline. So the night before the winter solstice, I'm kipping on the couch.
Is this 2013 we're on now?
It's 2012.
2012, sorry.
Yeah, 2012, the night before the winter solstice for 2012, which is almost 2013 anyway, obviously, because it's 22nd, 21st. Was it 21st of December?
Yeah.
So we're talking like the 20th of December. Actually, it must have been the day before that, because the magic must have been on the night before, the 21st. Do you know what? I can't remember right now, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, before the winter solstice, I have this kind of dream vision on the couch where I see a mirror rising out of a sea with an explicit knowing. Told you how many times I'm going to say that. Explicit knowing of the entity being Raphael, and it's like he shows me how to do a spell, basically. So I'm like, fucking hell, I'm not going to ignore that, I'm going to do it, you know. So a little bit amateurish still at that point, you know. We're a little bit more, you know, a little bit more knowledgeable these days. But go down into my basement study, make a salt circle, invoke the, you know, the angels of the quarters and all this. And I don't know why, I just kind of felt like, you know, I knew another explicit knowing. I kind of just knew that, just don't think about it, just do something. So I built up this kind of psychic potential, this force, and I, you know, felt it, you know, and I was playing music, so I was like in a state of rapture with the, you know, this beautiful piano music. Zytraz Passage actually is the CD I was listening to. Beautiful, check it out. Zytraz is the keyboard and main song, or the music writer. His brother does the lyrics of a band, Samael. Zytraz Passage. I was listening to, and so it had that kind of, again, that kind of Golden Dawn feel about it with that beautiful piano music. So I chucked out this notion of make the solstice special, and I visualized all that force going to the Stones, where we were going to take our finished CD, because I, you know, burnt it on CD, and so I basically released the music on the internet on YouTube, and I also bring a CD to the Stones. This is what's going to happen in the morning. So obviously the night before I've done magic to make this powerful, because of a dream vision of Raphael in a mirror rising out of a sea. So as part of the magic ritual, I got that mirror, because it exists in my house, put it on the outside of the circle in the east, and just stared into it and tried to communicate with Raphael. And by the way, we do believe in angels, and you know, this is to obviously, you know, we're talking about hermetic magic and, you know, this kind of thing. So we're not, it's not new age crap. You know, we're aware that angels, you know, they have, you know, they're archetypal forces that you've, some of them obviously, you know, the main ones, planet, angels are the same as gods. Obviously in the Judeo-Christian thing, you've got God, and then the angels, and paganism you have, you know, greater and lesser gods. It's all the same thing, you know. You can fuck. But anyway, you know, angels, this is, you know, they do exist, and you can experience them. Even years before this, I remember, you know, waking up next to my ex-wife actually in the early hours of the morning with a sense of feathers, and because these, you know, these analogies, they, you know, they're not drawn out of nothing. These are the symbols. The symbols that are imposed upon them are also the symbols that they use. Where did it start? Chicken and egg, you know, type of thing. You know, there is a symbolic language, you know, tied in with astrology, planetary forces, and various religions, where these beings that we call angels wear the clothing of, you know, that kind of feedback loop of the way we see them, and, you know, that's their method of communication, because what else are they going to use? Anyway, so I send it to the solstice, and we're going to meet there around about, was it 6 a.m?
Yeah.
So bear in mind, I've sent this force the night before, and I'm asleep, and I'm just sort of getting up ready to meet Samuel here at the Stones with the CD. You got there first, so you explain what happened.
Okay, yeah. I think because time, this is a problem creating a record of it so long after it happened, because it was 2013 when I went to the Stones and had the experience. It was a whole year after we did the 2012 one. So
When you had...
when I went to the Stones on the 2013 solstice,
Yeah.
so it was the second solstice, was when I had my experience that sort of put me on the magic path. So
Me in the yellow jumper.
Yeah.
That was 2012, right?
no,
That
it's
was the first one.
2013. Yeah.
Was it really the second one?
It was, yeah.
Fuck! Oh right, okay. That's there you go. It's important that we talk, and we need to make a timeline because
Yeah.
so many years have gone by. Okay, so we need to change things a little bit now. So the first solstice, I remember that went well, and we had a good feeling about that. So it was actually the 2013 solstice that I had the vision of Raphael and sent the force to you, and all this took place.
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies there.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Carry
because I remember after the
2013 solstice. Sorry.
2012 solstice,
Yeah.
because it was a wider known date, across the world, people in various walks of society knew that there was, potentially they thought it might be the end of the world and all that cobblers. So there were a few other people up there when we got up there, or around the time we got up there. It was about 2 or 3 guys, a few teenagers come up, and one historian come up, didn't he? So very rare that you get other people up the Stones on the winter solstice. Up the summer solstice, it's like Woodstock, but some winter solstice, it's cold, it's dark, and no one can be bothered to make the commitment, basically, apart from us. And I wouldn't be unfair about saying that, because it's true.
You summer solstice, it was easy. Winter solstice, that's the separates the wheat from the chaff.
That's the darkest day. That is the darkest day. So so after the 2012 solstice, we made that offering without realising, with a knowing, but not really realising the culmination of how powerful that was going to be, or how long that power was going to stay effective for. And I think between the 2012 and the 2013 one, so the first and the second one that we went to, life was a bit like coasting, but I did a lot of reading, and I think that it kind of unlocked a spirituality in me that grew, waned at times, because obviously you're trying to keep your normal life stuff going, and this was before ever really doing anything typically magical. So 2013, I know that 2013 was, so the night before that you did the ritual that you'd seen in your vision.
Yeah, and this explains why you kept saying 2013.
Yeah, that's right.
And now you say that, it's all clicked into place, and I realise. So obviously I might have made that mistake before in previous videos, but it doesn't take away from the the facts. So I'll be careful to make that adjustment, and in fact we'll make a timeline before. We'll sit down and make a proper timeline.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're waiting there.
Yes.
I've sent the force the night before. Then I've gone to bed.
Yeah. So you've sent the force.
Yeah.
And basically, I no awareness of this. We haven't talked. All we've done is sent text messages saying, "Yeah, see you up there about 6." So I wake up, and I'm an early riser anyway. I wake up really early, like something like 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I'm like, right, I might as well go up there. I've just got this feeling that I want to be up there in the dark and, spend a bit of time up there alone, because it had been a year since I'd really been up there on my own. I've been up there a couple of times, I think, but not for any special reasons. So I leave early, and as is typical of the winter solstice, it's not cold, crisp and bright. It's dark, wet, windy, muddy and fairly disgusting in terms of the weather. So I get down there and pull up and start walking up the hill, and of course you're out in the woods in the winter, in the night. It's going to feel a little bit strange anyway, but not as much to me, because I'm like a country boy. I've been out in the woods in the dark before, but so it's kind of like coming home going up there. And so you go up through this tunnel of trees, and it's almost like a kind of
grove.
It's it's an adjustment in itself as you go through this tunnel. It's almost like a journey into the underworld, and then it opens out into this sort of hillside that's partially illuminated by lots of lights from homesteads and units and industrials and house states, like a little way in the distance. So it's just kind of like illuminated by its surroundings, so now I'm trying to bring back this. I've got to keep this as fairly short because I could talk about this for hours, what happened up there. But instantly I'm not myself. I feel very strange, and I feel like there's a presence, which is not unusual for these sort of places. So I'm standing out there,
and by this time we're very certain that the ghost of Bluebell Hill is a goddess.
Yeah.
Although at this point we haven't connected that with the Morrigan.
No.
But we're very much aware, and I should say as well at this point that going through a divorce and all this kind of thing, a lot of sadness going on. There's I had this kind of I don't want to talk about this too much, but I had this kind of sort of romantic entanglement with someone who worked close by in the area, who also had her own problems, which I look back now with extreme regret, and I'm very sorry for what happened, and obviously wish that person well. But we both kind of I got the wrong end of the stick. She was too friendly, and it's a strange analogy that it's like a female presence going on there. So there's this strong, heavy sensation of a kind of female presence and strong synchronicities going on in the area. Okay, right.
Yeah. So that sort of notion wasn't really going on in my head at all. I was pretty green when I went up there. Obviously we'd made this CD, but to me there was this kind of general flavour of spirituality and history and ancestry, and nothing to do with magic, no knowledge of astrology or anything like that. So if Broderick had told me what he'd done the night before, I probably wouldn't even come up there. I probably would have been like, oh, this guy's nuts, right? But because I knew that you'd done Ouija boards and you'd had these out of body experiences, and that was fascinating to me. But I was still a little bit intrepid. But in spite of that trepidation, I'd gone up there in the dark on my own to what I knew to be a place that was haunted. So I kind of curiosity overcame my fear, which is a very typical thing to say when you talk about magic, and an important one. But anyway, so I'm up there, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I feel this kind of buzzing in my head, like an electric kind of current, and it's something to do with the way the rain's falling up there. It's something to do with the leaves and the grass and the foliage and the noise. And so I decided to go away from the stones and underneath the trees to shelter from the rain as well. And when I was under there, I started to hallucinate, and bearing in mind that I had smoked a very small amount of cannabis like before that, but a very, very small amount.
Yeah, and it's important. We'll always be truthful about everything. Yeah. And you know what? If you think that smoking a joint is going to instantly give you the illusion of access to the spirit world, then you are deluded.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on.
And bearing in mind I've got a very good tolerance for things like that, and I've done it before. I'm not potted, I don't do that sort of thing.
But it will help. It will help a kind of
yeah.
So
I'd literally had a few little puffs on a pipe and then walked up there. So absolutely no way that was going to produce what happened next. So, but it's as Alan Moore says, you need something to get you there. So I'm under there and I start hallucinating, but the worst thing was I started hallucinating spiders and insects, and I'm terrified of spiders. So I wasn't terrified of these spiders, but they were, it was startling. So, and they were descending from the trees like in a sort of like a glowing white light, that blue-white light that you associate with the astral. And especially when you do things like invoke pentagrams, that's exactly how you'd visualise that sort of thing. So anyway, so I'm under the trees and I'm thinking, I don't actually like this, I need a bit of a break from this. So I went back out to the stones, and this went on for about half an hour. So I would collect myself out by the stones in the rain and the wind, and then I would go back under for another vision, and this went on, and I won't go on about all the visions I had, but they were very specific to my own state of mind, and they seemed to be very aware of my history as perhaps a Christian, and at that point I was religiously kind of a bit of a no man's land. It had gone Christianity, and then I was at that stage being opened up to other ideas and occult ideas, and I was in that very big crossroads for me mentally at that time, without even realising it, because I was quite comfortable in myself. But so this visions went on, and then I went back out to the stones, and then I began to listen to the wind, and the wind seemed to speak to me, but not in words, but in a language that was more kind of metaphorical, and I knew that it was sort of more breathing than talking, and I understood it, and I started to have visions of the landscape around the stones, and it didn't look like it actually does. It looked like thousands of years ago, little settlements, smoke rising from cottages and things like that. And then I started to see beasts in the distance on the horizon, sort of cows, like the megaloceros, the giant, the giant stag, and things like that you'll see in what's his name? Graham Hancock books. They talks
You're talking about like prehistoric.
Yeah, I started seeing things like that.
That's interesting, because I've had dream visions of there being lions in the area, and apparently lions used to roam across this area, before the breakup of the last ice age.
Yeah.
So carry on.
Different beasts like cattle, rabbits, all sorts of things. It was almost like they were surrounding the stones, watching me. It was like everything was being magnetised, and then I thought the words in the CD, magnetise, energise, Guy and Bones, Standing Stones, and then our own lyrics that we'd written, or lyrics that I'd written as well, about being standing in a circle and being without fear. And I was like, this is all too strange, and strangely coincidental. So I was experiencing, then it seemed that the wind was, every time the wind blew, it was carrying an idea towards me, and I understood it. And when the wind stopped, it was kind of dormant. And then at one point I felt that behind the stones there was a precipice, and it was just an infinite universe, and there were stars. And when I'd had enough of that vision, I'd go back under the trees and I would talk to the trees. And at one point I was talking to a tree that looked like Treebeard out of Lord of the Rings. And so all my psychology is playing into this, and all my childhood history, and that mental landscape is manifesting. So these visions are as much created by my mind as they were coming in from outside. But what you have to understand are the two are uniting, the two are one. And the veil and the sort of chaff between them is just being cleaned out, and they're first time they're being allowed to coalesce. So anyway, I move it on. So I then see a light around me, like it's coming from me. So there's like a small circle around me that appears to be a kind of yellow colour, like an orangey golden yellow colour. And I tried to sort of move away from it, as if to say that, you're a bit like when you're watching a cartoon or a pantomime, and the character's being illuminated by that spotlight, and it follows him everywhere, and he tries to get away from it, but it's illuminating him. Well, that's like this, but it was this yellow light, and as I moved, it moved with me, and all around it was glowing, and this was kind of a bit crazy by then, but I was like, this is amazing. And anyway, so I ended up going under the trees again, and then I hallucinated a wall of what looked like water that had a mirror surface, and I kept looking at it and obviously wondering if it was real, but there was no question that it was real because it was so very real. And I moved towards it, and I put my hand into it, and my hand went into it as if it was a sheer face of water, and I could still see my hand through it, and it behaved like water, and it didn't really feel like anything, but it was almost like something out of Stargate, where you put your hand into the teleporter or whatever, some real sci-fi stuff. And in the end, I decided to walk through it. So I got really brave and I took a few deep breaths and I walked through this wall of this mirror water, whatever it was. And as I walked through it, I looked to the side so I could see myself passing through it. And it just behaved exactly like walking under a waterfall. It was really strange. And then when I got to the other side, I realised that there were more, and I started to walk through more of these things. And in the end, I felt it was going to go on forever. And part of the reality of what was actually happening was thinking, well, Broderick's going to be up here soon, and maybe I need to get back. So I walked out through the mirrors, and before I went back out to the stones, a voice came into my head, not really spoken, but a more kind of communicated, like
explicit knowing.
Explicit knowing, that's the one. Yeah. So, and I'll have to use that because there are more circumstances where I have to describe explicit knowing, and it said, the two things that best describe you at the moment are a spider and a crucifix. And I just thought, the spider and the crucifix as a spider is my fear. The crucifix is a Christian symbol. To me, that was all it was at that time.
And also, we wouldn't have known back then, but a symbol of obviously being, linked to Christ,
Yeah.
and Tifereth in the middle. It's a sign of a notion of awareness of being on a spiritual journey, and the holy guardian angel calling.
And it's the Kabbalistic sphere of Raphael as well, isn't it? So no coincidence there. So there's that going on, and then the crucifix appeared in that familiar white light in front of me, and
we should say at this point as well, Kabbalistic sphere of Raphael. Although these days we put Michael in Tifereth and we put Raphael in Hod.
Yes.
But we know that there's a bleed over between the two, because Raphael, there's an image of being linked to a solstice sunrise. Raphael is a rising sun, and this is common in occult philosophy, that there is a kind of debate about who goes where. That's the point of contention. But we, in terms of seven spheres working, Trithemius, all that kind of thing, I've had a lot of success and a lot of results and confirmation of Michael being in Tifereth and Raphael living in Hod, but is able to they share qualities and etc. etc. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, useful point. And actually what happened is the spider and the crucifix, that went into my head, and then I saw the spider in front of me with its legs stretched out, like this white spider, and then it sort of changed shape into a crucifix, so it was only going off in 4 directions. So there was this kind of metamorphosis of this image in front of me. And then this crucifix kind of bled outwards in a kind of pattern of a sun, and turned yellow, and I've forgotten it again. The knowing, what is it? The
explicit
knowing.
Yellow again, yellow.
Yeah, the explicit knowing communicated that don't forget you're here to see the sun, and the sun is now here. And just as I realised that it had all got light, and I hadn't even realised because I was so focused on the visions and the experience, then for a brief period of about a minute, the most intense, complex, melodic, like heavy metal music entered my head, rhythms that I couldn't possibly have comprehended in a normal state, and I wish I was able to reproduce.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and I just listened to that, and I was like, oh wow, this music's amazing. And I've had dreams like that sometimes where I've had that sort of music. That was brief, and then I saw Broderick coming up the path through the tunnel of trees, and he was wearing this bright yellow jumper. And just as I went forward to shake his hand, I realised he wasn't there. And I was like, oh God, I've just hallucinated that. And then this happened several times. I was like, oh no, now he's coming, and it wasn't him. And now he's coming, and it wasn't him. I was like, oh, I'm going to stand by the stones, get some air. Came back in, and then eventually he did actually come up, and I shook his hand, and it was actually him.
And I found you in a perplexed, confused, kind of shocked state of like. And then I told you what I did the night before, because you didn't know at that point. and then it all made sense. I'm coming up, I've always highlighted this yellow. Yeah, it was Raphael. I used the colour yellow because that's, Raphael yellow, the East, especially at that time. Like I said, there's crossovers and things. And so I've sent that magically something, make the solstice special. This is a special time, just this power, this feeling. And so I arrive and he's already reached out to shake my hand 2 or 3 times and I wasn't there. And eventually he's like, oh my God, are you, you were like, is that really you?
You're real.
So, yeah. So, and obviously I'm a little bit taken aback as well because I didn't expect it to have quite so much of, an effect, because we're still both kind of a little bit green at this time. And so we have a conversation where I'm saying, you know what, Samuel, I'm really balls deep in this magic stuff. And we start having a conversation about black mirrors and crystals and, diagrams and tables and Hermetic philosophy. And at this point, the Celtic thing is not quite on our radar. We haven't quite made the connection with the Morrigan-esque presence in the area being, so much in that form. We just kind of know her as a kind of white, goddess, female figure in the area.
Yeah. So
what that does is that blows the doors off, and that sets off a long chain reaction where, now we're spending the next, obviously it's carried on ever since, but like there's a long sustained intense period of reading and studying magic and practicing and which will, carry on, for our lifetimes now. And this is just one of, many, many adventures and stories that are, are connected with the area. You see, because so many threads start. Now, one thing I think is important to mention here is the similarity between our meeting that day and the meeting between Bran and Wolf in the book The Way of Wyrd.
Yeah, because there's another small piece to that solstice experience that I want to explain.
I'll be back you carry on, I'll be back in just a second.
Yeah, so that was the 21st of December 2013, so that's a year after we made the CD offering at Stones. And that's our 21st, and then fast forward to a few days later, so it's actually Christmas morning on 25th, and I am it's the sort of waking up hours of the morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I have an experience where I'm in a not semi-awake state, but more a kind of meditative state. Hadn't ever meditated at this point, by the way, so I'm sort of half awake, but I'm deep in somewhere, and I don't know where, but I feel a coming together, and again, explicit knowing that something is coming together into my consciousness, and it's a combination of sound and light and words.
Talking of light, let there be light, and there was light.
So yeah, just like that, sound, light and words, but not words conveyed, spoken, but conveyed in this explicit knowing way, directly, and I see them coming together in front of my eyes, but I hear a crescendo of cymbals and bells, beautiful chiming sound and a ringing, and a whitish golden light that's coalescing in front of me, and that all comes together in a multi-sensory way, and then just spelled out a word, and I was like, whoa. So I woke up and I wrote this word down on my phone, because that's the way we do things these days, typed it into like a blank message and just saved it, and then fell back to sleep. And then when I actually got up a few hours later, the first thing I was done, that word, and I almost forgot it happened. So got this word out, so I don't know what that means. And the first thing you do these days is you type it into Google, and it doesn't come up. There's absolutely no searches for this word at all. And I will say what the word is, because although I took it as my magical name, I don't feel that there needs to be any secret around that. So the word was Theosulus, spelt Theo and then Xulus. This is a kind of strange word.
Yeah, and just to interject at this point, like in terms of magical names, you know, they can be multiple. And I mean, obviously we've adopted these names, you know, for this channel: Samuel Connor, Broderick Wallace. And as I explained in the previous video, Broderick Wallace is actually a magician stroke shaman, you know, who travelled widely around the ancient world in the 1st century, who came back to the UK around the time of the Roman invasion. And this is, you know, like a kind of part creation and part, you know, kind of, I don't know, sort of strangely synchronistic, you know, consolidation of, you know, personal psychology and a way of being able to explain things in a metaphorical sense. So when it comes to names of a higher order, then we would never diverge those names. So but anyway, carry on.
Yeah, sure. So so that was kind of like the after experience of that solstice experience, was the coming together with this name. So I had to sort of really, now a lot of people can get really carried away with having a dream like that, and you have to for a bit. You have to let yourself travel with it, but you know, you also have to remain skeptical and just say, oh, it's just a word. But
hang on a second. My babies, we'll come back for the next part in a moment. I need to fuck. So where did we get to?
I was talking about that magical name that came into my dream.
Yeah.
And I won't go into too much detail, but obviously that word doesn't mean anything, and I had to work out. I had to also assume that, you know, it might not be anything, but some people might have gone, oh, is it a name for one of my past lives or anything like that? And I didn't really know much about that at that stage, so I just decided to interpret what the word meant and see if it led me anywhere. So in the end, after a lot of searching, I found that if you change the X to a D, Theodulus, it would mean there's a number of historical figures, often Christian, obviously with the prefix being Theo, and one particular Theodulus was a Christian during the time, must have been about 600 AD, something like that. So the Christianization of many Roman parts of the Roman Empire, and you know, there's an interesting story around that, but that's not really super relevant. But I did take a lot from that story. But in the end, I tried to look into the etymology of the word, and obviously Theo being the prefix of like God, and then Zulus, which is completely different sounding. I had to really go deep into it, but it turns out Zulus is like a word in ancient, like Mesopotamian or some dialect that was spoken in Alexandria a long time ago, and it means to be finished, to be done. So you've got this hybrid of a Christian word and like an ancient Egyptian word that means God, let God be done, let God be finished, or something like that. So I translated it into Hebrew, and I had it inscribed on my first magical athame. So I had, because at the time I started to read into the Western mystery tradition and look into that side of magic. So anyway, so I took that as my magical name because I thought it was appropriate, and I thought it was the purpose of that dream, and it was one of the fruits of that experience and the ritual, Quixote and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, getting lost on that one, but that's that was important because that was directly linked to that experience at Quixote. Yeah. And after that, the journey of 2014 began, which was a really special year. But obviously we've both got a lot to say about.
Because at this time, you know, we're reading Franz Bardon, and we're practicing a lot of meditation, and we're practicing some of the techniques of, you know, magnetizing water and doing the beads, you know, at night, and obviously the meditation stays, but a lot of these things I mean, you can't be doing this every single day, all of this stuff. It's, you know, and the meditation goes on and off depending on, you know, you might be going through a bit of a rough period, and that's normal. So I would never want to create this impression of living like a monk, you know, dedicate, because, you know, we're working people, and it's the overall commitment to thinking that way, and, you know, the meditation, you know, being, you know, a thread that is, if it's ever dropped for a short while, is picked back up, and obviously the real practice, you know, is the main thing of actually doing magic, you know, sigil magic, and you know, creating elementals, and trithemium system, which we've done together. We did Mikhail together, didn't we? Had some amazing results from that.
Yeah.
And which actually culminated in a visit during the night. But the Mikhail is another thing. This is also linked to the Holy Guardian Angel and Tifereth, and a creative period coming on, a strongly, you know, creative period. So we're, you know, texting back and forth, and I had a whole year where I went through the 7 spheres and contacted all of the planetary angels, and for each one there was, you know, a sign of contact, and for specific ones there might have been a feeling in the room. With Mikhail, there was the explicit knowing of a lion in the crystal, and many synchronicities. I'd say the most surprising one was after contacting Samael in Mars, and then getting a message the next day from the lead singer and guitar player of Melakesh, right? Who, you know, and Melakesh means Fire Lord. You know what I mean? Like, you contact Samael, next day you get contact back from, you know, the main man of Melakesh, Fire Lord. I mean, you couldn't make it. It was just an internet exchange over a comment I made on a post that he made, because he's a very, you know, affable and you know, gregarious, you know, kind of guy. He comes across that way, that he's kind of down to earth and, you know, willing to talk. So
yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
remarkable times getting into those occult practices, learning various pantheons within magic, you know, the Western mystery tradition, and, you know, there's so much, you know. I mean, I only discovered that in 2014, like, so after that Kits Coty experience, I got straight onto astrology, because you gave me a book, John Anthony West, Case for Astrology.
Oh, yeah.
So that introduced me to...
So the knowledge of astrology is increasing. Obviously, we're learning that astrology is the strong basis of magic. Astrology is...
That was big.
That's a big...
So I got astrology done.
Part of magic, yeah.
Yeah, astrology, and then obviously once I knew about astrology, I constructed my own birth chart and taught me about myself. And and applying the principles of astrology. So that was big, and then it was on to astrology linking onto the Kabbalah, Dion Fortune, Mystical Kabbalah, best book on that. Again, you provided that one to me, so I learned about the principles of the Kabbalah, which is just, it just blows your mind, doesn't it?
We really need to stress at this point that reading Dion Fortune's The Mystical Kabbalah is like a massive piece of the puzzle. Like, if astrology is a massive piece of the puzzle, and you know, meditation is another piece of the puzzle, actual practice is another piece of the puzzle, the knowledge of the Kabbalah is just, it's like a roadmap to, you know, reality and the wider dimensions and the archetypal principles and how they interact, and, you know, why gods and goddesses have particular names and symbols. I tell you what, you know, if you're into magic, you need to, I mean, if you're into the Western magic thing, you know, the Kabbalah, you know, and couldn't recommend that book highly enough, The Mystical Kabbalah. That and Crowley's book 4, and Franz Barden's Initiation into Hermetics. And obviously there's all kinds of other bits and pieces you can. I mean, Gordon White has been a massive influence on us recently, and Gordon White has a foot in the alternative archaeology camp as well, and this notion of, you know, reaching out to the stars and the stars talking back, which leads to the confusion that a lot of you know, ancient alien theorists, you know, tend to find themselves in. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, there's never been any contact. I'm not saying that at all. But, you know, obviously a lot of that stuff online is bullshit, and that particular, you know, TV series is fucking diabolical. You know, it needs to be said almost everything is wrong, and almost everything can be interpreted from a, you know, a spiritual / magical point of view, because there's a strong overlap with, you know, fairy lore, psychology, you know, blah 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 blah. Oh, the threads.
But yeah, astrology was very important because you've got these cornerstones of magic, and so with us, with me, it was 2014 was the year of discovering magical practices and putting them into practice, and having the guts to actually go with it as well. So astrology came first, then it was Kabbalah, then it was the tarot, because obviously you need to link those all together. Once you're experiencing the tarot, you start knocking on the door of the Golden Dawn and all that sort of stuff, and then you discover things like pentagram and hexagram rituals and things like that, and then you've got the archangels of the four quarters, and all that starts coming into play. And so you start practicing, and you stop being a theorist, and you start practicing, and you start exploring little spin-offs. So we go to the Goetia, we go to Pope Runyan's work, we go to, you know, Solomonic magic, and then, you know, there's a bit of there's all sorts of stuff, you know, and it gets a bit overwhelming, and you end up with a library full of books that you haven't got the time to practice. I mean, Enochian, I mean, you know, that's very, very difficult for anyone to do in their spare time. You know, you need to be on that 24/7 ready to do it.
And
so
the Enochian, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
the Enochian thing, we can't go into everything about ayahuasca because that'll be a separate thing, but we will have to mention it at times. And I mean, we experienced a kind of Dee and Kelly type experience, didn't we? You know,
we did with ayahuasca. Yeah,
we're not going to relate our personalities to them because we're very similar in lots of ways. And obviously Kelly was a rogue and Dee was a genius. So, you know, we're not putting ourselves in those camps, but we're saying the idea of someone all of a sudden becomes in contact with, you know, an exterior, you know, consciousness that is somehow connected, you know, which is what happened to me with the goddess in the plant. And I was just like, basically, you know, she said, your name's Mouthpiece, tell him to ask questions. And
yeah. We did. We had that conversation with you as the medium and me asking the questions. And obviously that was after a full-on experience of the drug visually, wasn't it? That obviously we're skipping forward quite a number of years, but you know, that's got its part to play.
That's got its part to play kind of later on in the story. Yeah.
The reason I mentioned that Theosilus, that vision of the word, is because of its association with part of that word, and the nature of that word is not typically indigenous to this country. Part of it's ancient Egyptian, and I don't look like your typical indigenous native. I don't know. Obviously, everyone looks different in different ways in different parts of the world, but in this country we have a great big mix of people. But it was interesting that Broderick's got this very native look to this country. You know, he's got those eyes. I've got darker eyes. I've got the dark hair. I look a bit Roman, and it was no sort of coincidence really that we just seem to emulate that Brand and Wolf thing from the Way of Weird. It was quite strange.
Yeah, that links perfectly into Bran and Wolf. It's like, you know, Bran is, you know, travelling, you know, from further abroad. Wolf is native. And, you know, we obviously at this point you don't want to be getting carried away and too fanciful about things. But, I mean, I'd read The Way of Weird, you know, a few years before, and we read it again, and I bought a copy and gifted it to Samuel here, and we were both struck by what we were later to learn from that and the follow-on book What's it called, that book?
Real Middle Earth?
The Real Middle Earth. The Real Middle...
Yeah, exactly. Lord of the Rings.
That book, The Real Middle Earth, that's what really opened up the door to being able to have a, you know, a kind of language that we could share, and then we could then imprint on our contact experience with the stones, where we were thinking more, you know, more European, if you like. And like I say, we're a mixture of things, but we, you know, the heart of this experience is a very European thing. She's a local deity, if you like. Has that, or it's coming through that channel. So I mean, obviously, you know, we'll have an opportunity to go into, you know, details, especially in written form, and, you know, at a later date. But what followed on from there was, you know, so we have that period of intense sort of positivity, but there's a lot of shit going on. I mean, more for, you know, myself, you know, off the back of a divorce and this kind of thing, and change of residence and all this kind of stuff. But what happened was the reason I made that video before, you know, trauma and spirituality, is to kind of highlight the fact that my misery that I was going through at the time was resonating with the sense of death and darkness in the area, and the folklore and the vibe of, you know, this ghost of Bluebell Hill, this goddess. So, you know, a few failed relationships, and, you know, trying to survive psychologically, and succeeding, I might add, in the midst of a lot of personal trauma, which was giving birth to, you know, realizations and, you know, creating their own strengths. You know, I'm not playing violins here, you know, I'm very, very grateful for that experience. But it's funny how many synchronicities linked up. So I'm living here on my own. The house is becoming slowly haunted, especially after doing the ritual of the headless rite. In ayahuasca, we're having the goddess, through the opening of the DMT, come into the ayahuasca sessions, and there's a kind of conflict there, and it's like black paint is being poured into the previous rainbow of ayahuasca. And so what happened, I mean, if I go to like actual, I will try, there might be something I'll leave out, but I will try to remember actual experiences of the goddess of Bluebell Hill. One was a particular night where I did like a kind of meditation journey of visiting the stones while I was lying in bed. Then I fell into sleep. Then my dreams became, like I've explained before, this kind of astral state where I was actually at the stones. I met an entity at the kind of gateway before you walk into the open field, if you like, just in the trees there. And the entity said, you know, be careful, she's a goddess of death. And I was like, obviously taking that very seriously. Then I was shown what I would have to do to initiate myself further into the mysteries of, you know, Kitskoti and the goddess, which I won't go into detail here, but I performed. On that same night, I saw a dark cloaked female figure walking through the woods. But you know, she seems to have no form and many forms. So there's been nights here, you know, in this, especially at some of the more difficult periods, with, you know, a sense of dread and foreboding, but at the same time, love, strangely enough, and affection. So if I don't visit for a little while, I went on holiday for a couple of weeks, and then I was ill for a couple of weeks. And while I was ill, I had the astral buzz come over me, and she approached from behind in blinding white light and held onto my hand, you know, in a gesture of, you know, where have you been? You know, this also happened in ayahuasca. My hand turned, I'm going through this quickly because we don't want to, you know, we don't want to drag it out, but we do want to cover the main points before shortly, you know, he's going to help me move out of this place. So my hand turned into a crow's foot, which is linked to the initiation. And again, she was holding on. We went for a walk, and I just said before we left the house, there's going to be a sign. and we see a puddle that is shaped perfectly like a crow. I'm getting, the magpie thing, I'm getting black and white cats scratching at the door. He's getting magpies scratching around in his roof. We're having all these shamanic animal contact, like too much to be a coincidence. Like literally he'll ring me up and say, I've got magpies fucking around in the roof, and I'm like hearing them scratching at the door, and there's a black and white cat scratching at the door. It's like you couldn't make it up,
Yeah, and that was just one.
And that's just one of
just
many,
hundreds, wasn't it?
So so we feel a need from her, a need to communicate with us. So you imagine so many, like your dreams of, I'm going to communicate this book to you. I'm going to, speak through you. All without words, because she's never spoken. Explicit knowing again, So there's another time. I mean, when I was ill, when she approached from behind with the white light, I'd also had a vision of Woden or Odin under the earth, with the ancestors at that same point. So there's a lot of stuff going on, with the ancestors. And there's a night when I'm here, and I've seen shadows in the house.
Yeah, I remember it was January last year, and it was a full moon, and I remember being in this room, and I mean, I thought there were flies in the room. I kept seeing black things darting around, and they were about as real as they could possibly be. I kept stopping and going like that, and there was also seemed to be a darkness exuding from the top of the stairs, and it seemed to be coming out. And if we'd have gone back to, I think it was October, November prior to that, which was when we did, I think, the 4th ayahuasca ritual, and that was the one where there was the goddess conflict in it, all was very dark. That same appearance of a black, almost like a vapor that had an intelligence was in the house. And I mean, my experience of that ritual that we did with the ayahuasca was an incredibly intense buzzing. You were in pain, weren't you, during that experience?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, we'll relate these on a specific ayahuasca video, but I actually got attacked, and it was fucking agony. Hurt like fucking balls, mate. You know what I'm saying?
At that stage, we didn't really know what that
was. Because we're not going to make out like it's, we're not going to tell this lovely story that everything was rosy, and it's because there are other spirits, and we've had to handle some of the darker stuff. But I do speak with every confidence to say that, it's a good relationship, in terms of the goddess. But you see, there's other things going on in there, and the spirit world is not like this, all, light and smiles. There are other things. So you're not going to know unless you go through it, and then you're going to start learning how to deal with it, and you're going to, and you can also see it as part of the, the initiation process. So. Yeah. There have been negative experiences, and there was one night I remember, just waking up in the middle of the night after just this sense of presence, and this explicit knowing again in the corner of the room, the dead shall rise. Just those words, the dead shall rise. And I didn't know if that was, referring to my own, low state at the time, that, there will be a time when I would rise out of it. But the funny thing is, much later on, I was standing in exactly the same place where those words come from, and I, stood there in the corner of the room. I said, "The dead shall rise," and then I had this feeling come over me, like, "Oh my God, I heard myself in the future say those words." And I'm not talking about that made that fit at the time. I'm talking about a strong sensation of like a weird. It comes over you like, oh my God, like I'm saying those words standing here, and a few weeks back I was lying down there hearing those words from myself. I've had this happen quite a few times over the years, where something has happened and then it plays out in the future. So there's a relationship between past and future.
Yeah, they exist at the same time.
Like everything exists at the same time, and in the wider dimensions, if you like.
Remember Red Dwarf? Do you remember that? Future Echoes always reminds me of that.
Yes, it's a bit like that. Like literally, like the past is coming back and influencing you in the present, and then you're going on to actually perform or experience that thing again, and you think, well, what chicken and the egg, like which comes first? It's like it's all existing at the same time. It's Gordon White did a discussion on that on his Rune Soup not that long ago, actually, about that same contact, about a dialogue between past and future. That, you know, I was sitting there like, yeah, God, yeah, we really have, you know, experienced that. I mean, so that, you know, there have been many, you know, contact experiences, and obviously, especially recently, I related in a previous video about the door opening and, you know, her head, you know, rising up. I mean, even last night, you know, as I'm drifting off, I see that same door. Things have ramped up, and even to the point where, I mean, say for instance, we were chatting to a well-known occultist, actually. I'll be respectful, I wouldn't want to, you know, bang on and, you know, name drop and all that kind of thing, but, you know, she was picking up on this and was sort of advising, you know, maybe sometimes you need to chill for a little bit, you know, and yeah, you know, obviously that's advice coming from someone that doesn't know you on a deeply personal level day to day. So obviously, you know, knowing myself, I know that, you know, I've always got that objective view and that handle on things, and, you know, but I still do, you know, recognize these, you know, these dangers, and you still have to operate with a, you know, a certain degree of confidence, knowing that the rough does come with the smooth, you know. So you know, it's not all wondrous revelation. Sometimes there are trials and tests which relate to this idea of something actually, you know, developing in you, which will, you know, which is, you know, kind of entwined in a personal destiny, which is linked to people that you know, and this idea that the, you know, the spirit world and by the process of magic and all the things that you're learning and going through, there's a dialogue going on where things are trying to happen, you know. Stories are trying to play themselves out, and, you know, when you start messing with synchronicity and you start being a, you know, a proactive participant in chance and luck and destiny, then, you know, you're going to get some odd side effects, you know, play out on that. And was there anything whilst I was chatting you?
Well, yeah. So I think it's been in the last couple of years we've really experienced that dark time, haven't we? And the stone goddess with the Morrigan, that effect's been really strong, but it's also strong around the winter time, and it's strong on full moons, isn't it? Like we've noticed.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the first ayahuasca ritual we performed was on a full moon, and it was also a full moon when we had the one that was very dark. And in that one, my experience of it was that I was very calm throughout when you were having the trauma, I was very calm. It was kind of strange. It was almost like they were pointing out that we were sort of in opposite places at that time in terms of our what we were up to, and, you know, what was going on in our minds on a day-to-day basis. And the next day, or on that night, I came down into this room, and I was followed by this kind of that dark vapour, and I sat in the chair which was over there and had a conversation with her. And at this time I wasn't sure if I was talking to the ayahuasca, the South American goddess, or if I was talking to, well, you know, whatever this other female presence is, we didn't know, but it was obviously female. And she said a few reassuring things to me that I was getting older, but I was doing fine and all that. And then it was very brief, and I still felt the darkness, that foreboding. I felt the power, you know.
Yeah, because like if you're
It's
gonna
awesome, but
if you're gonna go on this journey and you're interested in self-development, you're interested in the meaning of life, and you're wanting to embrace the full spectrum, and say, you know, you hear the calling of and let's face it, you know, a lot of us are broken people in many ways, and that brokenness, again, trauma and spirituality, is actually, you know, part of the process. There's this meme, you know, that shamans, you know, go through a lot of shit, and I can tell you that's fucking 100% true. And yeah, so I mean, in one way you're, you know, you're level-headed, and you're, you know, like I said, you know, at the beginning of the first section of this, you know, you can stand back with your arms folded and just say, yeah, you know, whatever, and you know, I'm going through this, but I'm going to keep it all secret, and you know, not make or you know, or I'm too afraid to, you know, confront what's happening. You know, but if you want to engage in that, and you feel it as a calling, you know, you're going to get to the stage where you've actually got something to say, and there's a process going on that you're going to have to learn how to handle, because if you ever, well, put it this way, it's impossible to turn away from it. You know, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. Once you know, have, you know, that knowing in yourself that, you know, these things are real, that you know, have a duty, you know, towards, you know, maintaining a spiritual dimension within your life, and everything that you do matters. If you're, you know, say for instance you're, you know, a Buddhist meditator, or you know, a Christian philanthropist, that's kind of different. But you see, you know, if you're practicing magic and you're interested in, you know, the ancient roots of, you know, all this, and you have that eclectic sense and that, you know, sort of kind of chaos magic attitude, you're going to have to face the fact that, you know, the spirit world is populated by all kinds of entities and qualities, and I mustn't repeat myself really, but you know, you will have to engage with the full spectrum, and try and get better at that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would say, I mean, I was quite scared about doing a Ouija board for the first time, you know, and I couldn't have imagined that I would be performing full-on magic rituals and experiencing the death goddess and being completely cool with that. So it's very strange. In fact, the goddess referred to me as Dark Horse, because you know, it's something I didn't realise I was capable of, and it's kind of almost a bit laughable, but yeah. So, and I've had some scary experiences. I didn't have an out-of-body experience until 2014, which was after the first time ever I performed the Kabbalistic cross at another stone site at Cauldron, and I had an out-of-body experience that night, so that was no coincidence. And that was amazing, but it was also quite terrifying because there was an entity involved in there. And that out-of-body experience was after having a dream which took place, and you were in it, and it took place in the house next to the guy that got you into hunting. And so all these things sort of link back. It's very strange. And it's that web of weird that's kind of weaving itself, and the strands are all linked, and you can kind of see the connection there. But whenever I have really deep sort of, they're not even dreams, they're kind of wanderings in the astral, they tend to take on the shape of my childhood home and where I grew up, and the woods and the fields I used to roam in, and they are the landscape in which I had those experiences, because essentially you always stay a child, and then you build up these layers of adulthood which almost feel a bit dirty.
Yeah, it's true.
And that you have to kind of wipe them off to get to your true self. And although you gain experience, that raw state you're in, what you what you first saw without any interference.
Fuck!
Is a state you return to in your dreams. It's kind of a strange way of describing it, but that's the best I can come up with at the time. But yeah, and then, so, backtracking a bit, 2014, got a good grounding in magic thanks to Crowley, Golden Dawn books, Dion Fortune and all that bunch. We don't need to name names. Barden is worth mentioning, because even Barden system is very, very hard, but even if you can make small inroads into it, it's incredibly powerful, and it's such a good discipline.
Lon Milo DeCamp as well.
Yeah. And but eventually we both gravitated towards a system that was easily workable. So, it would be great to get into Enochian, or great to get into Goetia, but it's difficult.
Yeah, so maybe at a later date, and I'm sure we probably will. But like what we found is that you can't keep, as much as you want to be eclectic and you enjoy the chaos magic approach to things. If you're having specific contact with specific deities, stroke angels and spirits, then certain things are going to start falling into place where you're going to start doing what's appropriate to that.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're fucking busy a lot of the time as well, and tired sometimes. And so what we found is this will be something that I'll definitely be a strong theme of the book that I'm working on. But meditation, a grounding in astrology, Kabbalah, a sense of place and the ancestors, sigil magic, and the trithemium system of angel magic. Is there anything I've left out?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think you...
That on its own is enough to last you a lifetime, and they're actually the most accessible out of the bunch, if you like. They're still difficult, they still require a lot of time. But say, for instance, if the trithemian system, that's what we found first, to be most readily doable, then that's kind of the way things played out.
We did put together quite a good ritual on the third solstice, didn't we, to Raphael? And that was made up of elements of, essentially the core of it was like a Solomonic style, where we performed circumambulations, and we used frankincense, and we used the names of the sun, and we used the names of the angel, and we drew the circle, and we lit the quarters, and although I didn't feel like I got any immediate effects off that was kind of one of my first little disappointments. I was like, nothing really happened, but in retrospect,
it did, between that and the ritual of the headless one, obviously Gordon White's book came out, or rather, we read the Chaos Protocols after, was it after?
After... Well, after...
I'm trying to think now, I don't want to make any mistakes.
It was only a few years ago, Chaos Protocol, so that was more like sort of 2016, something like that. So that would have been around the fifth solstice, something like that, 5th or 6th.
Yeah. Oh no, it was actually saying that. Yeah, it actually was all at the same time. I think what I'm trying to say is we were practicing forms of magic, before we did the headless rite.
Yeah.
But you see, if like doing that kind of, our own made up ritual with elements of things from other, practices and, Solomonic stuff, to Raphael, because, I'd received that vision as the, the first like major impetus of this whole journey. That is like kind of, calling out to the sun, and it was very much a kind of spell of a sense of destiny, like, yeah, we're ready, we're going to do this, let's go for this. So that's one sort of thread carrying on, and then obviously all the stuff with the goddess and ayahuasca and Barden and all kinds of stuff. But then as soon as you do the headless rite and start practicing the trithemium, that was like another
it was a big deal.
Yeah, that's like,
all that scrying across those those couple of years of, I mean, Brian Ashton's worth mentioning because he does bring that
Oh
together.
yeah.
And Rufus Opus, those two guys brought that
Oh
system.
yeah. We should definitely give Brian Ashton and Rufus Opus, and also Poke Runyon. Although I was saying that I did read what's his book called, the first one?
What, Poke Runyon?
Yeah, that book that he wrote, the famous one.
Or what, the magic of, it's the Magic of Solomon, is it? Or the
the Solomon book. Yeah. I mean, read that, but didn't actually directly practice anything from it. But Poke Runyon's podcast, the
Hermetic Hour.
Hermetic Hour.
Yeah, listen to all of those. Yeah.
We listened to all of them and absorbed all that. And,
fantastic guy to listen to, really theatrical, which you
Yeah.
need. But he's also got a DVD or a video that just describes and shows you workings of his inner temple, and it's useful. It gives you a lot of ideas. Although everyone's got to add their particular flavour to their magic and personalise it. So with our connections to the Celtic past and the ancestry here, it does stray over to various other pantheons and incorporate those. But the thing is, it all works together because it's all directed to the same place. They're all routes that lead to the same place. As long as you know
meditation and the scrying. Like if you practice scrying for a long period. Now this is not something I do regularly now, but I can look back on a period where I was, trying to scry every night for a good couple of weeks, and I'll get into bed and I would just see these bright lights of colour, and I even saw a battlefield with two armies on either side clashing, and oh my god, it does,
it ramps up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And your dreams ramp up as well. I mean, I think while you were doing a lot of scrying, I approached it in a very linear sense. So I just looked at the Kabbalah and I worked with the moon a lot, and I'm a Cancerian anyway, so I started working with the moon, and I went into Agrippa Agrippa Trithemius, and a few books and astrological magic around there, and I worked with the moon a lot and moon sigils, and I tell you what, they do work. The dreams were vivid colour every night. I was experiencing vivid, strong meditations. My scrying ability improved, and that was all through working with the moon, which essentially is supposed to tune your vision, tune your magical perception, and it really did work. So my intention was to carry on with those spheres over a number of years, but life came along and got in the way, and I had to keep my magic purely.
Back in just a second.
Sometimes you just haven't got enough time, and I'm not going to feel guilty or seem foolish for saying that, but I happened to do quite a lot of strong sigil magic in about 2015 because it was quite easy to do and quick. It's an efficient way of not getting what you want, but it's an efficient way of seeing results, and I did get results. And it catalysed a business growth that has enabled me to become a lot more stable financially. And over 3 or 4 years of securing that stability, I'm now in a position where I can relax a little bit more and devote my time to magic with that behind me. So at the time it seems like you're failing, and then in hindsight you realise that the path has been carved out for you through your own efforts and through the pull of whatever forces you're working with. So history always makes sense in reverse. We like to say that a lot, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it doesn't look like a very pretty picture, but and obviously there's a lot more to come. But we both practiced the Trithemian method. We both built our own tables. We both it took well over a year to get all the implements together and turn it into a working system. But we both got results, and then there was a little period of time.
Speaking of results, there's been times where magic fucking got me out of trouble. There's been times it's put me in trouble, don't get me wrong, especially when it comes to, the pleasures, and times when it's been beautiful in that respect as well, but there's been times where, because we should mention something about results, when it comes to that kind of thing. Yeah, you do see results, not every time, but very often, and financially, and in terms of relationships or things that might be going on, we're more than satisfied. And obviously there's many hundreds of people on the net that will be telling you the same thing. This stuff works, and it does. But what it comes with as well is it's gonna change your life. All right, you might be a person who just casually does a bit of magic, and you get a scare and a thrill, and then you just have a little story to tell. But I'm talking about, if you're one of those kinds of people, like what we are, then it's gonna radically expand your worldview, and the things that you felt anyway intuitively will be confirmed. To live with an absolute conviction of the soul and the spirit world and the ancestors, and gods and goddesses, and a deep respect for the ancient ancestors, and the wisdom that comes from the past. You look at especially when it comes to archaeology and that kind of thing, the primitive ancestors, and people didn't build temples and align them to the stars for no reason. It's because there was a dialogue going on. They were drawing down archetypal forces, and these were impacting the lives of the nation synchronistically. And world ages come and go, and nations rise and fall, and on a micro level, individuals rise and fall. But the roots to this go back to our beginnings. They extend beyond us, and it's fucking real. I don't know how I could possibly expand upon the statement that the ancestors were onto something with this stuff, and I know it's a cliche, but our materialistic culture has lost it, because you don't need it. That's the thing. You can just potter about like an unconscious monkey if you want to, but not everyone's going to get that choice, because you're going to feel like there's something wrong, and you're going to find yourself stepping into a wider world which comes with its own adventures and responsibilities, and if you embrace it in the right way, will really help you grow up and grow as a person. And I hope that anyone that has listened thus far will realise why we feel it would be a real shame not to document this story and to start telling it, especially because we've had those days where we were the green magical practitioners looking around on the internet trying to find people to trust. You drop some people, you subscribe to podcasts, you buy books, and you start so it's I'm sure don't get me wrong, I'm not into conversation or anything like that, but I'm merely just laying down a testimony, and that will continue in different forms, and obviously same for Samuel here. And we're gonna have to wrap up this particular session soon. There's a lot more to tell, but you see, the mystery of this goddess of Bluebell Hill is very, very central, and that site and everything that's happened around it is a major player in our lives, and because of the type of experience that we're talking about, my central message and wish is one of hope in darkness, really. Is to say Fuck! Don't, if you're the sort of person that's getting in this kind of stuff, if you're, dabbling, or you're the kind of person where this is full on in your life, or you're at that green stage we were at where you're looking for ideas and inspiration, it might get real heavy real quick. And darkness is a part of the pantheon. It's a part of the archetypal qualities of existence itself. So you're not going to be able to cut that out. And what I've come to learn, more especially, and through our dialogues as well, I'm not taking all the credit here, we feel that this goddess is a kind of like, if you want to go up, you kind of have to go down through the underworld. And like, there's this notion, I had a vision, a dream vision. Oh God, like every time you say something, 1,000 other things open up. But this seed falling and going into the earth like a seed from heaven. And then that seed gets buried in the underworld, and then a plant grows up, and then its leaves are basking in the light of a kind of, eternal source. And I was, lucky enough to have, a really profound experience whereby on that same couch I was keeping on, because me and my ex were, breaking up and arguing and all this kind of stuff. I had this experience where it was coloured by visits to the stones, because all of the artwork was Neolithic. I was in almost like an elevator shaft made out of stone, but then again it was made out of light. And it was like all those stone carvings that you see, in Ireland, North, Delft, all those kind of, just imagine those swirly patterns and crosses and crisscrosses and zigzags. It was all made up of those, and I went up, 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 and I'm buzzing, because there is a kind of bodily buzzing that seems to go on when you access the astral body. And I found myself I can't say I found myself anywhere, and you'll get what happens when I say this, because there was an eternal light at the centre of everything, and I was outside that light. I was that light, and I was also every point around that light simultaneously at the same time. And it kind of puts me in that idea of, wherever you are in the universe, you're at the centre. And, the physical world is almost like a kind of dream or manifestation of, a kind of eternity. And the light is, at the top of the tree, So I know I'm going like way profound, and I want to kind of bring it down to earth and say, that you live your life with, that, the knowledge of these experiences, and it's very easy, to fall foul. And I guess I would bring it back to that analogy that I talked about in the previous videos, where you have a flock of birds and not every one of them makes it. When you start turning against, I know I'm partially quoting Jordan Peterson, but he summed it up beautifully. When you turn against being, everything gets worse. When you take on responsibility, everything gets better, and that is not going to come without hard work and, some trials along the way. Fuck me, I could sell a book with that.
No, that's good.
Oh God, look, so we have to laugh at ourselves, because you can't. That's the paradox of living with all this kind of stuff, is that there's a mercurial aspect to it, and there's a sense of adventure, and you can't be walking around in a bloody robe all day, and you wouldn't want to. But when those moments come, you fucking switch on and you believe in what you're doing. And belief is such a powerful part of magic. If you're doubting things, I know Stephen Skinner. We didn't talk about Stephen Skinner. He's another great guy.
Yeah.
I know he says that, you know, it's kind of like a technology and you go through steps, and he sort of centers more on, maybe that's for him, that's true, you know. But in, you know, I definitely see belief, you know, faith as being, you know, an integral part of, you know, what makes things work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess to reiterate, you know, it would be a shame not to tell this story, and it's been a heavy burden.
Yeah, it's not something, I mean, it's not something we've been able to talk about, and you never feel like you're at a stage where you can talk about it with confidence, because you never know what it means or where you're at until like the last sort of year. It's been a bit more clear about where we are and what we need to be doing. I mean, the trouble is with people, not human beings, it's perfectly natural. We always put ourselves at the centre of the problem. Like, oh, you know, how is this affecting me? And what do I need to do? So we automatically assume that we are the ones that have to sort it out. And we do need to be part of whatever solution is or wherever things are going. But we also have to recognise that we are part of a web that's all moving together, and that sometimes we just have to stand fast. Sometimes you have to do what you need to do or do what you can, but sometimes you can't do anything about it. The results will kind of involve you at a time that's most appropriate. So I think the tendency is to get panicked. Like I started to panic when things magically didn't seem to be happening for me. I started to panic when things weren't working. I started to panic when I thought that I should be doing, that my career needed to be more involved around this art form when I discovered it, and what was I doing, and, you know, why am I doing business? It doesn't make sense, you know, it's not meaningful, and life got thrown on its head, and I became quite confused. And then when you lose the romanticism of getting into magic and that beautiful honeymoon discovery stage, you're suddenly left in a very kind of saturnine, it's only going to work if I give it the long haul, you know. And then you just really have to relax. Like, if you're gonna take on that Saturn side, which is, you know, that far planet, that governing planet, if you're gonna want to push the boundaries, then you have to be patient, like, because people tend to think that magic is gonna be a bit of a quantum leap. You're going to be able to sort of leap through shortcuts to things because it's a way of getting around certain laws that you usually have to abide by as a non-magical person, you know. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you need to let things just kind of integrate, and it takes a long time, you know. It sorts itself out, you know.
Absolutely, and the journey continues, and, you know, the learning process continues, and obviously, you know, personally and sometimes together. This testimony will take the form of, you know, well, it's already taken the form of music, so, you know, art as well at the moment, literature in the future. Obviously, we'll continue uploading videos. Sometimes Samuel here, you know, will join me, but it won't be like, you know, every week or whatever, because, like, just not hungry for the attention, and, you know, it's about something precious, real, and but I guess, you know, like, you know, in terms of a close, if we bring it back to, you know, the entity, the goddess at Bluebell Hill, and by the way, Sean Tudor's book, the Ghosts of Bluebell Hill, is a fine read, and we'd already made great headway before we read that book, and he was suspicious that there might be some kind of threefold aspect goddess going on in the area, which he kind of made the link with Hecate. Obviously, we were unaware of that book, and we'd already arrived, and with complete confidence that we're dealing with a local Morrigan So it's interesting to think that two camps, obviously, you know, we're magically minded. We arrived at a further conclusion and then kind of had that confirmed partially by some headway that had been made on the spiritual dimensions in that respect. But obviously Sean Tudor's book is more documentation of cases. So it's really worth reading Sean Tudor's book, The Ghosts of Bluebell Hill, especially for, you know, a lot of history on the area and that kind of thing. So I give that a lot of credit. And there's a strong notion of the land being traumatized. It was a holy site. It still is a holy site. It's had a road built through it. It's been disturbed. The spirits of the land are upset. The ancestors are upset. The goddess is upset about it. There's a lot of accidents in the area. You know, it's notorious for that. And I'm gonna end with like a little kind of wish fantasy here. You know. But, you know, whatever happens with my testimony, whatever happens with our destinies separately and conjoined and the web that is around us and what we may leave behind us. Say, for instance, you're listening to this, you know, if the internet's still around, if humanity hasn't gone extinct yet, which it will one day, it will go extinct one day, right? If you're listening to this a long way in the future, I'll tell you what I would like to see. And I would like to see a statue next to Kit's Coty of a very abstract, you know, light coloured, you know, talking like white, you know, female form where people, you know, from time to time might leave flowers. And there's a tragedy there. You know, there's something happened. I don't know, maybe she was a real person at one point. Maybe not. I really don't know at this stage, but, you know, there's definitely a grief in the land that is connected, you know, and it's like we're trying to tell our story because we feel we have to. And she is also trying, you know, in some way, you know, perhaps through us. Obviously, it would be, you know, impertinent to put too much emphasis on that, you know, personally from our perspective. But I would like to see that one day. I would like to see that area not paved over with a shopping mall. I don't want to see Kit's Coty. Like we had this idea that me and him will be meeting at Kit's Coty one day. And it's in a
roundabout.
On a roundabout, yeah.
They've just left it in the middle of a roundabout,
yeah. You know, it should be. It would, you know, it's very hard to see how that would be. It's possible, but you know, it would be nice to see that area kept special, and for there to be, you know, I like the idea of, you know, of a statue, you know, placed there, and people. And I'm sure there are more of us that have, you know, had experiences of her. You know, you could go and make an offering there, venerate the ancestors, leave some flowers, you know, for the goddess there. And maybe spare a thought to those two crazy gentlemen in the 1st century of the is it the 3rd millennium now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, because it's 2000s, that's 3rd, yeah. And okay, it's been emotional. My name's Broderick Wallace.
Samuel Connor.
And there shall be more. Sweet dreams. Fuck! Just about to leave this house now where, you know, so much has happened. And, you know, I've reviewed all of the material that me and Samuel laid down. And like, later on you think, there we were chatting about the origins of this whole thing with the goddess of Bluebell Hill for us and the... in terms of the music project. And I find it very odd that it didn't immediately spring to mind because don't think about it a lot. actually, but it's so key and so interesting, and that is this whole awareness of the Bluebell Hill thing came into being when my ex-wife took a job where she had to drive down, that road on the way to Maidstone and back. And she woke up one morning and said, I had this the strangest dream about a young girl dressed in white that I picked up along the roadside, along that, I can't remember exactly how she described it, but it was that same, the Bluebell Hill Road stretch, somewhere, near the Shell garage and somewhere in that general vicinity. Detail's not important, I guess, but that main road, so it's very, that's where all the ghost sightings take place. That's where all the stories come from. Now, my ex-wife being Turkish, she didn't grow up with that legend. I first heard of the ghost of Bluebell Hill in the playground as a young boy, So I immediately said to her, I was like, whoa, are you aware of the ghost stories, the legends in the area? I was like, no, of course not. She comes from Turkey, and believe me, this is the last thing she's going to be interested in. In fact, this is the only time I can ever remember her waking up talking about a dream. One of the reasons why we didn't work out is because we just, we weren't able to connect on that kind of thing, really. So that's why I was kind of double surprised, So it was her dream about the young girl in white getting into the back of her car. And I'm sure she said something about looking back and she was gone, like there was some sort of disappearance involved. But nonetheless, a young woman in white, and completely out of the blue, I said, have you seen anything on TV? No, I've never heard of it. No. And you see, even if she had, why would you dream about it, And when you think about what that it's so there is a strange genesis to it all, for us. And so that's what led me to start thinking about the area and going online and seeing, there's these stones there, Kitscoty. And at the same time, the music project was taking off. So it was like, let's make it about the Bluebell Hill ghost. And then just, within, a very short while, this notion of the goddess was manifesting itself. And it was like, not directly in the music project. It was still growing. It was still growing at that point. But there was an interest in the stones and the history of the area with the Battle of the Medway and that kind of thing. And that's where it all began. And obviously feel kind of emotional now. The place is just empty and, my voice is echoing because there's nothing in here pretty much, just a few tables and chairs and odds and sods. And this is the room where I did the Trithemius 7 Angels over the course of a year. I think, what year would that have been? Was that? I think that was 28. Was it 2018? Yeah, across 2018. Yeah, I did the all 7 Angels, and obviously, and the Headless one as well. Before each ritual, it started off with the ritual of the Headless one, and I think what I'm going to do is before I leave this place, I'm going to have one last meditation here, and a lot of sad memories and things like that. And I'll stick this on the end of mine and Samuel's chat. I quite take seriously the idea that all time exists at the same time that, time, there is no time on the other side, so it intrigues me. Have to make a start, have to begin, and you have to use what you've got. But it intrigues me, the possibility that there might be, knowledge in terms of, mythology and possibly a magical system that could be retrieved through prolonged contact. Yeah. So life carries on, and we move into a new era where I will be busy on a few projects that will manifest at a later date, and we'll upload videos here and there, and create a timeline, and apart from the personal goals, in terms of those, things that are close to one's heart, the idea is to, or actually alongside, is to grow and develop with everything, all of this knowledge and the practices. When you've experienced the truth, the veracity of living that kind of life, in the words of Geraldine Beskin, actually, when me and Samuel were chatting to her in Atlantis Bookshop, you step into a wider world. I mean, she also told me that I'm a headbanger, and maybe I should have a day off here and there, and that I was closer than I realised, and that's played out. Those words have played in my mind a few times, actually, and it's about walking that tightrope, right? That's necessary in the beginning. It's a part of the way things go. But the truth is that when you have responsibilities, and when your ultimate goals are just, and you just want the best, then that will guide you through. Just try and I'll just end actually with the analogy of that central pillar, or you can think of it. I mean, you can think of it in terms of the tree of Yggdrasil, or whatever way you want to look at it. There's like a column. We're on the earth plane. There's an underworld. You go up, and that's the place, like an intermediary point. You go up further, and that's that blinding white light, and that's the source. So just in our own small way, considering that we're only human, any good intentions, any progress towards connecting with that intermediary state, the what they call the HGA, will be answered, and take that from me, no matter how tough things get. Righty ho, ho, ho. Gonna do my last meditation and close the door and begin a new era, carrying everything that is valuable with me Till the next time.